So welcome to the Skaneateles Lake Association's 2022 annual meeting online, obviously hosted by Zoom. I'm Frank Moses. I'll be starting the session soon. We're going to kick off with a celebratory video on the Werner Research and Education Boat, produced by Andy Robinson. So thank you, Andy. And just wanted to note, during this session, please use the Q&A button if you have any questions. For those having issues with the Q&A, the chat box is fine as well. We have 171 registrants as we last checked, and see that folks are coming in. And without further ado, before introducing our board president, Dr. Paul Torrisi, who will be taking over the meeting after the video, we'll get this started. Great, and it's all yours, Paul. Great to see you.
Great to see you too, Frank. Thank you very much, and welcome everyone, and good evening. We're really looking forward to finally meeting again. We were looking forward to finally meeting again in person just a few days ago at Lourdes Camp, but with the greatly increased transmissibility of this subvariant and the large crowd expected, we decided to go virtual once again for the third year in a row. Hopefully next year we'll be able to resume in person and get together like we all prefer. The agenda going forward over the next 50 minutes or so, following my remarks, Frank will spend about 15 minutes with his executive director's report, go over some membership and board elections, and then Rich Hole, our treasurer and general counsel, and I really mean he's our general counsel, thank you, Rich, we'll review our financial situation very briefly. And then Dr. Charles Driscoll, Charlie, our board member and distinguished professor at Syracuse University, Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering, will give us a summary keynote address on research activity in the lake and the watershed, and how it informs current mitigation and restoration. And then after those remarks, we'll have ample time for questions and answers, and Jim Tifft will moderate with Frank. And if we need to go over an hour, if anybody wants to hang around, we're certainly willing to do that and have further discussion and questions and answers. So yes, the Bob was commissioned on June 27th. The Skaneateles Country Club is generously providing anchorage at its north end, and this new SLA research and education boat is expected to be in high demand in the months and years to come. So many thanks to all who generously contributed in Bob Werner's memory to make this happen, and especially to Fran Rotuno-Fish for conceiving the idea and personally soliciting our generous community for the financial support to build the boat. Also, very special thanks to Dr. Bill Dean and John Menapace for their creativeness, many hours of hard work, and especially their perseverance in bringing this to fruition. This research and education boat has already been utilized by researchers from Syracuse University, Dr. Charlie Driscoll, Dr. Chris Schultz from the Department of Geology, to continue work analyzing the lake bottom sediment, even at depths of 150 to 200 feet, thanks to the sophisticated equipment on board, such as the GPS satellite controlled trolling motor to keep the boat in the same position while working, and a powerful winch and cable system to get sampling equipment down to specified depths. In addition, SUNY ESF graduate students working with Dr. Bahram Salehi are currently using the Bob for obtaining lake turbidity measurements. These will be used to calibrate satellite data and provide additional monitoring. Also, a sophisticated sonar scanning system is on board to assist in tracking and mapping Eurasian milfoil and other invasive macrophytes for further eradication and control. In the days and weeks ahead, many will see the boat navigating the near shore areas along the entire perimeter of the lake with volunteers on board, helping to do the prep work for continued milfoil control next season. Please wave and say hello and thank those on board. Speaking of aquatic invasives such as milfoil, what a success this has been now in its 15th season of operation. It's accurate to say that this nasty and rapidly growing weed has been brought under control in Skaneateles Lake. And we remain in the maintenance phase thanks to all of us who annually support the SLA with membership dues and additional donations. By the way, very special thanks again to Fran Fish for her initiatives and hard work over the years, bringing SLA membership numbers into the thousands, and to the hard work, resourcefulness, and creativity of John Menapace and his dive team at Aquatic Invasives, Inc. Of course, this work will need to be continued indefinitely, since once invasives such as milfoil establish a foothold, it's next to impossible to achieve complete eradication. All the more why it's so important to continue with our boat launch watershed stewardship and inspection program to keep other nasty invasives such as hydrilla out. This weed has been reported in multiple locations in nearby Cayuga Lake, where control attempts include chemical pesticides, since it can grow much more rapidly than even milfoil. If it did establish a foothold, hydrilla could really adversely affect water quality and augment HABs potentially. Many thanks to Buzz Roberts for all his leadership and hard work since this program was established back in 2012, one of the first in the Finger Lakes. And to Marty Minette, our head lake steward, and her dedicated staff, who have been doing a wonderful job helping to reduce the further import of invasives into the lake. Many experts feel that limiting this macrophyte weed growth is helping to keep the lake clear and pure, and even helping to prevent more severe HABs in the midst of our changing climate. Perhaps something additionally in our toolbox to help, quote, control the controllables. In addition to these continued efforts addressing the potential devastating impact of invasive species on the local economy and drinking water quality, the establishment of the Legacy Fund back in 2018 has provided funds necessary to support our full-time executive director, first Rachel DeWitt in 2018, and I believe Rachel is at the meeting tonight, so hi, Rachel. And presently Frank Moses, now in his 4th year and doing a wonderful job despite all the obstacles from the lingering pandemic. Legacy dollars are also supporting our continued work with Anchor QEA environmental consultant and Skaneateles resident Tim Johnson, who, by the way, has worked in addition many hours pro bono with the SLA Lake Ecology team, especially with Dr. Dana Hall and Frank on the Grants Watershed Improvement Projects Committee. The Legacy Fund also provides seed money to help support the ongoing effort for research in the watershed and lake. We hope to continue to support this critical work going forward since it's informing mitigation and restoration actions right now, while simultaneously contributing valuable data in support of the developing 9-element plan. And following the completion of the 9-element plan, there may even be more opportunities for remediation support from state and federal sources. Charlie Driscoll will elaborate and summarize much on this during his keynote remarks following Frank's report. In the minutes to come, we'll continue to learn more about what's been accomplished this past year, but there have also been a couple of disappointments. First, the DEC's approval of the application from the city of Syracuse to use the chemical pesticide EarthTech, 20% copper sulfate, to treat HABs despite overwhelming objection from the SLA board and watershed community following robust review. Second, the lack of local municipal capacity to sponsor and/or administer grants from not-for-profit organizations such as the SLA and others for water quality improvement projects, so-called WQIPs from the state, both now and perhaps even after the New York State 9-element grant has been completed and certified. We must come up with an interim solution to develop the capacity to sponsor and administer these grant opportunities within the individual municipalities or collectively through a legitimate intermunicipal watershed council, now and in the future, so potential money isn't, quote, left on the table. SLA will continue to promote efforts to help glean funding from the state and encourage the city to take the lead in working with the local municipalities, counties, and non-governmental organizations to achieve this goal. Finally, a plug for renewing SLA annual membership and Legacy Fund support. In addition to all of us continuing to renew our SLA memberships annually to support the existing work to help keep the lake clear and pure, we are in the midst of an ambitious appeal to raise an additional $1.5 million for the Legacy Fund over the next 3 to 4 years. Many have already seen how Legacy Fund dollars have been invested since its inception in 2018 and what's being planned for in the near future. On this slide, which shows essentially the historical investments from the Legacy Fund since its inception in 2018 until 2021, I just want to point out the four major areas of investment. And I think, Frank, if you're moving that pointer, the first, of course, is subsidizing a full-time salaried executive director. The second involves research, monitoring, and analysis for potential sources of nutrient pollution. And you can see most of our dollars over the first 3 years have gone to these important projects, enlisting Upstate Freshwater Institute, Syracuse University, SUNY ESF, and others in performing this work. The third major category of investment involves watershed improvement projects, money to engage with an environmental consultant such as Tim Johnson from Anchor QEA, and also initiating some of the stream rehabilitation projects such as Dowling Creek, work at Russell's Landing, and also the ongoing Willow Brook subwatershed, which should be completed, I'm pleased to say, this fall. And Frank will have much more to say about that in a few minutes. And then the fourth category is helping to leverage dollars and glean funding from other sources. So money was used to help Onondaga County Soil and Water write its grant, and then glean $50,000 from the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative to start treating the infestation of hemlock woolly adelgid. And then the Legacy Fund, in addition to that, kicked in another $25,000 to help with this project, which is ongoing. $10,000 as a match to help promote a $50,000 grant awarded to SLA from Central New York Community Foundation. And this will be helping with our floating classroom initiative and also the SLUES project, which is the Skaneateles Lake Emerging Watershed Scientist Program to help educate youngsters. And finally, at no cost, but with ample use of our executive director, helping Senator John Mannion's office glean a $100,000 grant from New York State to help set up a more sophisticated HABs monitoring program on Skaneateles Lake, which SLA has been designated with the city of Syracuse in implementing, initially focusing on important swim areas such as in the village public swim area, the Skaneateles Country Club and Lourdes Camp. And then the next slide shows a quick summary of what our action plan with the Legacy Fund hopes to accomplish over the next several years. And very quickly, again, support of a full-time salaried executive director, such as Frank, who is absolutely essential. Continue consulting with Anchor QEA Environmental Engineering to help with improvements in the watershed. Continue projects such as Dowling Creek and Willowbrook, finish Willowbrook. Continue to support HOAs such as Winding Way, their project, which will consist of drainage and runoff nutrient capture and reduction, and hopefully help subsidize many other homeowner associations around the watershed in completing such projects. Providing or continuing to invest in data collection, monitoring, and analysis of lake sediment through research projects, through Syracuse University, SUNY ESF, DEC, Upstate Freshwater Institute, continuing support and advancement of operations of the new Dr. Robert Werner Research and Education Boat, to facilitate in-lake monitoring of aquatic invasive plants, sediment core sampling, education workshops, and additional on-water research. Hopefully implement watershed-wide boat inspections with decontamination when required, in addition to the current SLA stewardship program, to further limit introduction of new aquatic invasives into the lake. And last but not least, continue to survey and support use, treating and controlling, and hopefully eliminating hemlock woolly adelgid infestation that threatens eastern hemlock forests in the entire watershed. Bob Werner always was quoted as saying, if we lose the hemlocks, we lose the lake. The Legacy Fund 2022 Appeal Committee, co-chaired by Fran Fish and Dana Hall, along with other volunteers, Jim Tifft, Rich Hole, Joe Grasso, and myself, working with Frank, have been hard at work, and over $300,000 has already been contributed and or pledged to get us off to a terrific start. Our levels of participation will continue to be recorded cumulatively, so donors can move up from one level to the next, from friend to benefactor to leader, and perhaps even to founder. So this slide shows those four levels, those four designated levels of giving. And again, they're cumulative over the years. So with each additional donation to the Legacy Fund, one can move from one level to the next. And as this campaign continues, I would like to urge all to seriously consider the crucial role that the Legacy Fund will continue to play in helping to preserve Skaneateles Lake in the years to come, and ask you to join in on the effort. Many thanks. Thank you all for Zooming in and for the great attendance that we have. And I'm going to turn it over back to Frank now.
Great, thanks so much, Paul, and really appreciate this synopsis. It's very clear how busy we've been and how busy we want to be with this report. I did want to recognize Paul as being not only a phenomenal board president, but really has been a surrogate parental figure for me through the years, and really enjoyed our relationship. And what's true is that I'll talk more about our leadership with SLA as moving on, but what's clear is that the folks you engage with that are on our board and all of our volunteers, what's unique about having a lake association is that we're the only institution that's solely dedicated to the care of this lake. And whether you're families that have been here for generations, whether you're someone like Paul, who met his wife Mary and was on the banks of Skaneateles in their college days, saying, I love this lake, I want to live here. There's something special and unique, and we hope to be a vessel for the care that, whether you're just new to the lake, whether you work, live, or play here, whether you've been here for generations, there is a great care and compassion for this lake. And our job is to be as organized as we can, and be client and see you as clients to protect this watershed and work with all the other partners we'll be talking about this evening. Without further, I did want to, prior to introducing our other helper with leadership, Rich Hull, I did want to talk about the care for our lake, and that's through our membership. And wanted to thank again Fran Fish, who's been at the helm of our membership. You probably, if you are a member, you've certainly heard from Fran. If you've renewed, thank you very much. And so Fran really keeps, she's the duct tape and the glue to our organization in front of the lines. She also helps my office with communications, where anytime someone goes to the contact us tab, Fran's our filter for that. And so we can have a good team effort. Just wanted to, on our website, just wanted to navigate where you can find to either become a new member for folks who haven't become a member. You don't have to be, you don't have to have shoreline property. You don't have to live in the watershed. All you have to do is care about Skaneateles Lake, and even if it's for the drinking water in Syracuse and other communities it provides to. There's great reasons to support our mission. But this is where you go on our website to do so, and to think about giving. And this is the phone number to call, for Fran, if you'd like to do that, and she'll be happy to help out. And just to give a status report, this is also on the website under there, where it says current members. Fran worked diligently and worked on this very recently to update our numbers as of August 17th. So thanks again, Fran. And you can see through the years where our membership grew in 2021 to over 1,026 members, or excuse me, 1,800 members. The way this is split is this is the 608 for between up to August 17th is the number of household, business, and community memberships. But then the individuals that make up those households and community memberships and businesses is at 938 as our current numbers show. This membership is extremely important. As Paul mentioned, it supports the main chunks of our aquatic invasive species program, our milfoil program as well. And so we're very thankful for all the memberships and thankful for the team that's helping engage those memberships. So we're still continuing with the numbers. I want to things over to our treasurer, Rich Hull. Thanks, Rich, for all your support and keeping an eye on the numbers with us.
Very good, Franks, and thank you. And thanks to everybody who is joining us here tonight, and also for your continued support and interest in the SLA. So what I want to do as the treasurer, I want to give you a snapshot of our finances, just so you have some context for understanding how we pay for the things that you're going to hear more about here later tonight. So early in each year, our finance committee prepares a budget, and the input on the budget is provided by our committee chairs and also by our prior experience. And we use that to maintain our finances and make sure that we're spending the money that you've all contributed, we're spending it properly and prudently. Our total budget for 2022 is $810,000. There are two segments to the budget. We have an operating budget of $370,000, and that pays for our signature programs, the milfoil program that Paul alluded to, our steward program, and also this year to help finance the construction of the Werner boat. Those would be the main principal components of our operating budget, as well as our overhead, lease costs, our executive director costs. And the total again is $370,000, and that money all comes from your memberships. primarily from your memberships, with some public funding as well. The other segment of our budget is our legacy budget. Paul's talked about our legacy fund, and this year's budget, spending legacy fund dollars, we budgeted $440,000. And that money is used for various projects and programs that, again, you're going to hear more about from Frank and Charlie Driscoll, but it's the research, it's the watershed improvement projects that we've undertaken. It's the education work that we're doing. It also helps pay for the Werner boat that was launched this year. So when you add those two together, 370,000 and 440,000, we have a total budget of 810,000 for 2022. Our assets as of June 30, 2022, totaled $1,122,000, of which just slightly over $1 million is in cash. The balance is equipment that we own and that is used in connection with our milfoil project, as well as, of course, the Werner boat. We currently have no debt. We have no long-term liability. We have actually no liabilities. So we're fiscally5sound. And to ensure that we're doing things right, we annually retain an accounting firm to review and audit our books and records. We're currently using the firm in Auburn, Buffington and Hoatland. They do a great job for us. They produce our financial statements. They prepare the Form 990, which is filed with the Internal Revenue Service. And they also meet with us and provide us with their insights on how we can better manage our finances and make sure we're operating in a prudent and protective fashion. The Form 990, by the way, is available for inspection. If you care to look at it, you can access it online. And also we have a copy of it at our offices at St. James Church, and you can make an appointment with Frank if you want to come in and take a look at the 990. By all means, you're invited to do so. So that's basically a quick summary of our finances and how we operate. And you get more detail, more drill down on where this money is being spent from Frank and others. And so I'm going to pass it back to you, Frank. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much, Rich. And I'm going to keep the pace going because I know we're cutting into time. I definitely am getting excited for Charlie's overview on the research, but we have a little more business to cover, and that is with our SLA leadership. But I did want to recognize and put up on the screen for a moment, if everyone can see that. This is a list of our current board members with our board officers here and our board of directors here as well. And then also our advisory council that Joe Grasso has been, our board secretary, has been really fantastic at helping and all of our leadership engaging these individuals. And the pandemic certainly impacted our engagement with our extra branches and leaves on the tree. And we hope to engage the advisory council more, but this is to have more ambassadors in the community to share the celebratory things that we're going over tonight, but also the needs we have in the community moving forward. So thank you all for this leadership and helping with our mission. The other part of this evening is we've got the business as this is our annual meeting and our members. I am going to launch a poll. Hopefully this works well. I think Paul and Rich and Charlie, if you're in as panelists, you might not be able to vote, but you can send your votes in by email and we'll add it to the mix. But all attendees, this is an honor system. If you are an existing member, I'm going to launch a live poll, which will have this statement saying, as a member of the Skaneateles Lake Association or as SLA, do you vote to accept Kate Ryan as our new board member? We're excited to have Kate and her prowessness in event logistics and the renewal of another 3-year term for the following board members: Bill Dean, Jed Delmonico, Bob DeWitt, Joe Grasso, Rich Hull, Buzz Roberts, and Paul Torrisi. So I'm going to launch this poll now, and thank you for your votes, and we'll give it a few moments to roll forward with this. Well, I guess I have an option where I can allow panelists to vote. So there it should be up on your screen, and please take a moment, and we're seeing the votes roll in. That's a great pace. So we have I think we have well over 100 participants that are online tonight, and it looks like everyone's voted, and it's unanimous with 82 members voting in. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to end the poll. I guess I'll share the results, and then I'll stop sharing and move on with our program. So hopefully my screen is still up. And so this will begin the report. I wanted to start with the state of the lake and related to our HAB monitoring. So the state of Skaneateles Lake is still great. We're still a low nutrient, wonderful oligotrophic, which means low nutrients. So we're a very clean, one of the cleanest lakes in the country still, and something to be proud of. We are at times like after these rain events we had, and at times before August 10th, where we had a strong wind event, nutrients are picking up and creating these harmful algal blooms. I'll give, Charlie may have a bit more to add about harmful algal blooms. If you ever get a chance to listen to Dr. Greg Boyer at SUNY ESF, there's a lot of details and more you can learn about the cyanobacteria that's been around for eons, longer than us. And it is a natural part of the system, but things are changing. So what's been changing on Skaneateles Lake? Well, there's certain things. In the 1950s, we had the Green Revolution, which was having more nutrients added in after World War II, added onto our agricultural lands to produce more crop yield. And now we're seeing the impacts of extra nutrients. Also, zebra mussels are tending to play a role. Zebra mussels are this little fingernail-sized clam that will, or mussel, that will filter and take particulate nutrients or sediment that's in the lake or comes from the shorelines, and they'll make it more readily available for these algal blooms. And then we've noticed the lake has been very warm, especially this year. I couldn't believe it. Looking at, there's a USGS link where you can see the live temperature. The city of Syracuse does a nice job every week putting out on their website and through Scan Lake Info. And we try and get it out to the community as well, what the temperature readings. But there was one day, it was the north end was surface temperature was at 81 degrees during the hot streak. So things are changing, and this is what we're seeing as a result of those changes. And a lot of these changes are due to our activities. And so this is our opportunity to see what we can do to change that. And one of the things that the DEC has been very helpful. I know Amy Klinkhammer, who's with the Finger Lakes Hub, Matt Marco, I believe, is on, the regional director for Region 7 is on tonight. So thank you, Amy and Matt, for your leadership. Amy helps keep eyes on this lake, and all the team that's around the New York harmful algal blooms, this shoreline monitoring program. We have about 30 volunteers that are monitoring various zones that you can see around the lake and keep an eye out for these blooms. I mentioned we had that one on August 10th from wind, and then this was from this morning. We've had these rains, and then we've also been taking these samples and sending them out. Greg, if you're on tonight, I believe you're registered, but I'll be bringing a sample to the lab tonight after this meeting from what we collected here. And Greg and his wonderful students at ESF are showing us that there is this microcystin toxin. It's a known liver toxin, and also these antitoxins that are known as nerve toxins that can be an issue for pets going in the water when they're at high levels. But this is serious stuff. And something to be very concerned about. That's why we try and get as best communication out to the community through our membership listserv on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and trying to get this out within hours of when we recognize something. These will show up on NYHABs, the ones from today, probably at 11 o'clock tomorrow. There is a little bit of lag time. The DEC is working hard, but they want to be sure what they're seeing, and there is a little bit of a filter. But that's a bit of the monitoring. And so also along with the monitoring is the city of Syracuse does monitor the intakes for the drinking water. And if there's ever an issue, they will communicate through Department of Health. They do the testing as well. and then it goes into an emergency management plan if needed. And that is related to this earth tech issue that many of us are aware of. The SLA reached out to the community firstly to make sure everyone was aware of this earth tech proposal. And earth tech is a chemical. It's based on a copper sulfate chemical to help address algal blooms as they happen. And we were not getting as much information and details at first, but then had great conversations. But what we found is that based on history of copper sulfate in the lake, that there is an increased amount of copper in the sediment, and it is above a certain threshold that there is guidance to assess for aquatic life impact. I don't want to get into too many details, but a lot of the community learned about this issue. There was SLA worked hard along with our different leaders, like County Legislator Abbott, to make sure information was getting to folks to engage and learn more and to be part of the public participation process. It was difficult during pandemic again, we're doing things virtual here, but we did our darndest to get word out and see that the community could weigh in and provide comments, and you did. And a lot of our membership, a lot of the community, you can see online at the DEC website the results that the earth tech was approved to be used, but there is a contingency that a pesticide management plan needs to be submitted, if it hasn't already, to DEC from the city of Syracuse by September 1st. So we'll be looking for that. And then if it's reviewed by DEC and accepted, then the city will have the ability to use this product. That's just wanted to objectively give an update on that and thank all of the folks that did respond and did participate as a community member. And we appreciate that. I'm going to pick up the pace because I know we got to keep going. So the other thing about moving on to programs that protect is our invasive species. I think Paul did a wonderful job highlighting that, so I'll only touch on a few things. Related to our water milfoil management, just wanted to thank Onondaga County and folks through the Finger Lakes Lake Ontario Watershed Protection Alliance, which has upped our funding. Historically, we've gotten $25,000, and we found that we were receiving $40,000 just this year. Hopefully, a significant amount in future years, but this year they had extra money that we're putting $40,000 towards this $158,000 program. Our invasive species, so thank you to the leadership at Onondaga County for that and keeping SLA on the support, with your support. Invasive species stewardship program, this is about a $75,000 program that's this year I think is mostly covered by our membership. There is a bit of support through the DEC that I'll talk about. Real quickly, I just wanted to give a show that 2018, our numbers of voters surveyed, we've seen stresses went from 7,000 to 14,000 in 2019. That's when Lake Ontario was flooded, so we saw more voters coming. And then during the height of the pandemic, on a nice, summer days, beautiful summer days in 2020, we had 21,000 voters, and our stewards are working their tails off at the DEC launch down at Mandana and at the Scott launch as well. And then we saw a little downtick because if everyone remembers, the water levels were high. We had a no wake zone. Again, thank you to the county for Onondaga County for helping with the no wake zone on that. So we did see a downtick, but we are seeing a lot more activity this year. Our WISPA reports that I had that chart for, the watershed inspection program reports, that they're all, these stewards are working, getting this data, and we're seeing how the boats come, which boats come from which lakes. But this is just an example of the lot being full. Thanks to the DEC for supporting our efforts at the tune of $5,000 to add in just to keep the peace a little bit and to monitor this issues, because there are very little parking spots at this launch and a lot of lot of interest in using the lake. The other thing I will lastly mention, I know I'm going short on time, but what's very valuable about SLA is our agility to respond to the changes in, as we saw, the weather, pandemics, but also having colloquial staff and be able to mobilize at a moment's notice. And one thing we didn't anticipate was that this year the walleye limits were removed for the lake to help reduce the walleye populations because it's affecting trout populations. That's the reason for the strategy. But we started seeing this type of activity back in April. We normally mobilize in May, and we had to start in April this year, and have extended our days that we're covering this launch because we saw a lot of the walleye sportsmen coming in early to take advantage of that reduction, or excuse me, removal of those limits. Moving on with invasive species, Paul mentioned our hemlock woolly adelgid investments. Working, certainly the Onondaga County Soil Water Conservation District has been phenomenal at helping as a partner and treating some of the areas. We noticed that there are areas that are in the steep ravines that we're a little over budget because it is tougher and more expensive to where climbers and folks like Zeb Strickland, who's one of the vendors or one of the treaters of the hemlock trees. They have to rope in, and it's a little bit lengthy of our costs. They do a basal bark treatment. But the reason why we're taking care of hemlock woolly adelgid, because if we lose these hemlocks in these steep ravines, there's not a lot of other watershed improvement project strategies we can do. We need to protect these trees to protect the soil from washing down the ravine. So thanks to Dr. Buzz Roberts and Dr. Dana Hall for leading the charge. We used some of our funding for hiring an intern, Will McCall, who helped produce some mapping of our coniferous forests around the lake. These red dots are where hemlock woolly adelgid species have been monitored that kill the trees. So we're continuing to invest and look at these steep ravine areas and also the steep shoreline areas as priority areas to treat. The program is in its infancy. We're trying to pick up the pace on it, but we did have some treatment on the 10-mile ravine this year with Zeb Strickland, with Dr. Buzz Roberts helping that cause. So thank you, Buzz. And that's also, as I mentioned, the HWA and treating that is one of our watershed improvement project strategies. And this is why we do watershed improvement projects and working with willing landowners. There are other partners. The city of Syracuse and Soil Water did a great job with the Shotwell Creek area. The Cortland County, Hugo County are doing culvert assessments, looking at how water's moving through. But the wonders of there's the Skaneateles Lake Watershed Agricultural Program that the Onondaga County Soil Water Conservation District and City of Syracuse work at focusing on a lot of agricultural projects, and that's a good focus and important. But there still is a lot of room to build our capacity for these non-agricultural projects as well, and to see if we can get more going on in the watershed. So this is Willow Creek. This is an example of these nutrient sediment. And then this, thanks to Tacey and Raleigh Anderson, thank you for submitting this photo of a bloom that happened at the mouth of Willow Creek, bringing this, to our concerns. So our first project on Willow Creek, and this is similar. I know we talked last year about Dowling Creek at the Skaneateles Country Club that we helped stabilize. Soil and Water did some nice work with 1 mile. But this is the upper reaches of Willow Creek. Dr. Dana Hall is our chair of the Watershed Improvement Project Committee and helps with the fund development, working with Tim Johnson, as Paul mentioned, with Anchor QEA. And this is an example. I don't have a photo of the structure. It's a log structure that's basically a notch weir that when the water comes to a high level, it gets diverted into this stream channel, this pathway through into a retention pond that was already existing and got expanded. and this is it in functioning. So any overflow beyond base flow will go and be held into this retention pond to reduce sediment coming down Willow Creek now. And then to take care of the lower reaches of it, this is, I guess I still have this photo here, but this is the design plan that Anchor QEA helped with. You can see these brown, looks like matchsticks. This is called excuse me, I believe this is Roskin's tow wood, but we can just call it tow wood. And this is just tree structures with the root ends that will help take sediment and capture it and stabilize the stream. And this is an example of SLA putting in some funds along with public funds that we just garnered through the Great Lakes Commission for $45,000 and some private dollars from the landowner here. This is right now looking around like after design and implementation at the end of the day will probably be just shy of $150,000. So it gives you a sense of the investment of just one stream. I am really going over time, but I'm going to move along. The other thing I did want to mention related to watershed improvement projects is there's a homeowners association on the west side. It's one of the largest homeowners associations, and I'm pleased to announce and want to thank the Onondaga County Executive Ryan McMahon, Onondaga County Legislator Julie Abbott, and Travis Glazier with the director, is the director of the Office of Environment, and Mike Plachocki, who's the director of Clean Water Initiatives, who helped move forward on a $30,000 commitment to SLA to help with a homeowners association sediment reduction project. So thank you for that. And I will mention it's the Winding Way Association, who has also been putting in dollars to improve their culvert systems and spent a lot of dollars, and they wanted to do more. So we work to help and do more. So I really appreciate everybody's efforts in that. We are still in the contracting phase, so we're still dotting the I's and crossing the T's, but wanted to thank the county for that commitment. And this is a result of us trying to find a host for the consolidated funding applications with New York State, where you have to have a eligible municipal lead. And we came across that there's some capacity issues to administer some of these grants that we're working on trying to alleviate. So we've had conversations with the city, and I connected, and I believe Mayor Ben Walsh is on this evening. Mayor Walsh, thank you for your leadership and commitment, and in conversations with the mayor, he is committed to explore some solutions to increase the capacity for grant administration and fund development. So we look forward to those conversations and continued work with that. And this really would be something to work with the Skaneateles Lake Watershed Municipal Partnership as well. So we look forward to having a lot of those leadership conversations to see how we can help, and if SLA can be a local match in the process too down the line. That's what we want to see, is just getting more of these projects and having a higher capacity around the whole watershed, which is relevant to the 9-element plan. So the Skaneateles Lake Watershed 9-element plan, this is basically a program that would, with an approved plan, would open us to more federal and state committed funds once that plan's approved. It looks like it's going to be 2024 at this time before the plan gets approved, gets submitted for approval. And we are working well with the Central New York Regional Planning Development Board and all the municipalities. There's a great advisory committee and a technical committee of different scientists doing the modeling to make sure we get the plan right. And if we refer to this plan in grant applications in the future, then that's similar to what we had to do with our harmful algal bloom action plan to get these funds. So I'm certainly happy to send you to the Central New York Regional Planning Development Board for answering more questions about the details of this. And thanks to everybody who did come to the Lourdes camp. There will be more public participation as the team fleshes out more of the plan details. Moving along, this is Liz Moran, by the way, with Ecologic LLC, who's done a wonderful job with the public participation. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Aaron McKeon and team. So this is just a snapshot of all of our counties and towns and city of Syracuse, all of our municipal and local partners and county partners, government that's been helpful. Also, I think New York State also is going to have more septic enhancement programs that we'll have some information out about. I know Onondaga County just upped another $450,000 into that program. This is the time to start thinking about upgrading your septic systems. If you have a history of failed septic systems or issues around the lake, this is the time before getting into winter to get that scheduled. So please reach out to us and we'll get you that information as soon as possible. Just another snapshot of a lot of our other partners, and we'll talk more about some of the programs before Q&A. And I believe that's it. And I know I've gone into some time, lot to cover, and wanted to introduce Dr. Charlie Driscoll with the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Syracuse University. Charlie's been phenomenal since I've come on board. He's been here for years helping with the stream sampling and creating a lot of added value. There's the modeling team I mentioned with the 9 element plan, but Charlie's really set a lot of the groundwork for helping us with our data-driven decision-making around these watershed improvement projects. So without further ado, I will turn things over to Charlie and thank you all.
Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yes, thanks, Charlie.
Okay, well, thank you all. Thank you all for listening in, and thanks for the introduction, Frank, and thanks all for all our members for support and interest in the lake. As Frank mentioned, there's a large group of folks that are involved in the research activities around the lake, and I'm going to try to summarize these over a relatively short period here. I'm going to give you just a smidgen of background information to set the context, and then talk a little bit about our monitoring programs, both in terms of the nutrients that are coming in from outside the lake, as well as the release from sediments. And then talk to close just about a little bit of connection to amplify what Frank said about how we use that research to help our partners who are working on the 9 element plan and our own group led by Dana Hall to look at mitigation projects, and then a little bit on future activities. So as Paul indicated, we're very fortunate here in Skaneateles Lake that it's really an amazing lake. It's very unproductive. I have a slide here showing you some data from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation showing the phosphorus concentrations in the various Finger Lakes, going from the west on the left to on the right, Tisco Lake on the east. Skaneateles Lake is right down here, and it has a concentration of about 5 micrograms per liter. So I want you to remember that. I'm going to come back to that. And why are we interested in phosphorus? Well, we're interested in phosphorus because there are a variety of nutrients that are required by plants, but the one that's generally in shortest supply that controls the growth of plants and algae and the cyanobacteria that we're concerned about is phosphorus. And you can see in terms of Skaneateles Lake, it's quite low. It has among the lowest concentrations that we see in water bodies throughout the world. And so we're very fortunate in that regard. And it's generally thought that if phosphorus concentrations were that low, that the lake would be immune from harmful algal blooms, but that hasn't been the case. There are a variety of factors that contribute to harmful algal blooms. Nutrients is one of them, but an important one is our changing climate. So these are a couple of figures from analysis of data sets that were available principally through the city, but other sources on changing conditions in the lake that was put out a couple years ago. And like every place, Skaneateles Lake is experiencing climate change. You can see these are lake temperature values, annual values through time. And the lake temperature, like air temperature, is getting warmer. And that is strengthening the stratification of the lake, the separation between the warm upper waters and the cold lower waters. And it's also lengthening the period of stratification. So therefore, it's lengthening the period of plant growth in the lake. Also, precipitation is changing. We're getting more precipitation, but the precipitation that we get now is typical like we've seen over the last couple of days. Fewer events, but when they come, they're very intense and result in very high runoff conditions, which can mobilize from the surrounding landscape. So the result of this is harmful algal blooms starting in 2017, photos of that year, but that's continued every year since that time. Typically around this time of year, late summer on into the fall, that's when we experience these harmful algal blooms. And as Frank said, there was one that was reported today. It's not only Skaneateles Lake, but this is from the DEC website about locations of harmful algal blooms around the lake, and they're throughout the lake and throughout many parts of the U.S. and the world. So they're very common phenomena, and they're having impacts, and they're being felt everywhere. So we're focusing on nutrients, and the nutrients can come either in from outside the lake itself, or they can be generated within the lake itself. And that's what we're trying to do in terms of the research program. So we're studying the precipitation and the particles that come in from the atmosphere. That's atmospheric deposition. And you might not think that that's a very significant source of phosphorus, but it's important to realize that Skaneateles Lake has a relatively small watershed for its size. The lake surface itself is about a quarter of the entire watershed area. So that what comes in from the sky, what comes in from the atmosphere can be quite important. We also see it coming in from the tributaries flowing off from the land, and that's an important component. It also can come in from inside the lake itself. So when the plants or macrophytes, when they die off, they can release phosphorus. We've done studies on that. And then we've also been looking at the sediments. To what extent are they released from sediments from internal sources in the lake? So we try to tally those things up and produce what's known as a phosphorus budget for the lake. And I'll show you some of that information a little bit later. So as I mentioned, we're measuring the tributaries, we're measuring the precipitation chemistry that's coming into the lake at a number of sites around the lake. And we've been doing this for the last 3 years. So these are data from some of the tributaries that we've measured in the lake. Along this axis right here are the phosphorus concentrations. And if you remember way back in one of my early slides, I told you to remember a number, 5 micrograms per liter, and that's typically the concentration in the lake. So if you look at these concentrations, they're quite a bit higher than 5 micrograms per liter. They're up in the 10s, even up over 100. So these are average concentrations over the 3-year monitoring period. During storm events, the concentrations can get much higher. And we measure the total phosphorus, but we also measure the forms of phosphorus. So phosphorus can be associated with particles, that's shown in blue. It can be in a highly available dissolved form, which is shown in green. So we can have different forms of phosphorus, and they have different ability to stimulate plant growth. We've also taken the phosphorus concentrations and coupled that with stream measurements to try to determine the loading of phosphorus coming in from the landscape. And this is shown here for some of the tributaries. We have 3 years worth of data, 19, 20, and 21. Some sites we only have 1 year, but many of the sites we have 3 years. And there's a couple things that you can see from this graph. First of all, there's a lot of year-to-year variation, and that's due to the year-to-year variation in precipitation. So last year was a very wet year. We had a lot of phosphorus coming in. This year is a relatively dry year, and once we have it all tallied, we expect it to be relatively low. The other thing we have is we have about 150 smallish streams that are supplying phosphorus to the lake system. So there's not one big river that's coming in that's dominating inputs. And the other thing, if you look over on the right-hand side, this is the precipitation coming in. The rainwater or the snow is associated with precipitation. That's the blue bar on the left. But if we look at the total amount, the particles as well as the rain, you can see there's quite a bit coming in. And remember, the lake area is about a quarter of the watershed. So this is a significant input coming into the lake. In addition, we've been measuring sediments. We've done sediment surveys across the lake, and we're now doing coring to look at the depth and the amount of change of nutrients in lakes, how they've changed over time. What we've learned from this is that we see pretty high concentrations of phosphorus in sediments, and the pore waters, or the waters that are within the sediments, also have high concentration. Remember, the lake water is about 5 micrograms per liter, but the sediment pore water can be easily 10 times that high. So the algae that are able to move up and down in the water column can access that pore water and take in nutrient that way. They don't have to take it in directly from the water column. We've done a series of experiments last year and the year before where we put in chambers to look at the rate of release of phosphorus in and out of the lake. And what we've found is really quite remarkable. The lake has an amazing capacity to retain that phosphorus that's coming in. So under most conditions, the sediments are receiving the phosphorus, and only rarely are phosphorus coming out of the sediments. Some work together with colleagues at RPI through a project known as the Jefferson Project have provided a lot of insight in the conditions in which the sediment phosphorus can be released to the lake. And what they found is that when there's a consistent wind from the south, that causes a rocking motion in the lake. And if that's coupled with very strong winds, that can disrupt the sediments, particularly in the shelf region of the lake, and cause the sediments to be distributed up into the water column. When that is followed by calm days and warm temperatures, that is a formula for the development of harmful algal blooms. So we have a good formula by which we understand where harmful algal blooms are forming, and we believe we can have predictive circumstances where we will know at least a few days before harmful algal blooms. Okay, so what have we learned? We've learned that there are many sources of nutrients throughout the lake, watersheds, and from the atmosphere. We learned that the sediments strongly retain phosphorus coming into the lake. However, under circumstances, particularly with strong winds and wave action, those phosphorus can be released to the water column, and if that's followed by warm, calm conditions, then HAB events can occur. So we use this information to communicate with our partners who are developing the 9MM plan to try to develop ideas for remediation strategies in the lake. We talk with folks, including Dana Hall, who's involved in the mitigation projects, about what are the tributaries which would be good sites for remediation. And once those remediation projects are done, how effective are they? How good a job are they doing at controlling the nutrients coming into the lake? And then what are other possible projects? So Paul and Frank mentioned Dr. Baram Salihe from ESF, who is looking at remote sensing techniques to try to evaluate the impacts of stormwater inputs. So I know we've gone over in time, and I apologize for that, but I'm happy to take any questions, or if you have a follow-up and you want to send me an email, just feel free to do that. So thank you for your patience.
Start video.
Great. Thanks so much, Charlie. Appreciate all your input. I did want to take a chance. We're going to transition to questions and answers. So Charlie, thanks for staying on. I do have other panelists that I'm going to be searching for and the attendees from our board meeting as we get going. But wanted to introduce Dr. James Tifft. Jim is a retired liver specialist, and you can get into more details about the right terminology for that, but that's how I'm known to call you. And that's been really helpful, Jim, in asking pertinent questions about the concerns with some of these toxins we see in algal blooms, keeping that inquisitive mind on behalf of our community as we learn more from the scientists like Greg Boyer and folks working on this problem and better understanding that. So thank you, Jim. Jim is also our chair, along with our, being a board of director for SLA, is also our chair of our community outreach and education program. And I'm gonna, I'll skip the slides, but I did want to mention briefly, I did see a question come up, Jim, we'll get to, but part of our community education outreach, and Jim, please feel free. I've done a lot of talking to carry the torch, but I did want to recognize before we get into this, there's some folks that have been part of our team. I mentioned Will McCall as an intern, but wanted to thank Grayson Landsberg, who helped a lot with our communications and getting some of our weather stations up that we didn't really talk about. We'll be having some more information about these weather stations we're putting around the lake. We've got a few more to get up before we'll let you know where a lot of them are. One of them is right here by our office. So thanks to St. James. I wanted to thank St. James for hosting our offices and also Wi-Fi and all that, but allowing us to have a good weather station. But wanted to, so that Grayson helped with that. And then our other intern, Nicole Kleinberg, who's been helping immensely with the operations of the Bob, the Robert Werner Research and Education vessel, and getting our equipment going and working very well with Bill Dean. We've hired a pilot, Kevin Donnelly, who's helping support the research activities. Kevin's been fantastic. Paul, if you want to share anything about that with the folks here with Kevin, I know you happed upon Kevin, and we're very happy with Kevin's support. And then, we mentioned John Menapace, but also Heidi Busa, who's been helping as an independent contractor related to this community foundation grant for our floating classroom initiatives. I think there was a question about, what we're doing with the schools. And so we are developing curriculum and are looking forward to share more about that program, where we hope to charter and get classrooms out on the Judge Ben Wiles, working with Mid-Lakes Navigation, but also have the research boat, the Bob, help for demonstrations with our youth, and also help, with teacher workshops. And we are working with a City of Syracuse teacher as well. So it's not just for folks around the watershed here, but it's also to connect youth in Syracuse about where their water comes from. So we're very excited about getting that going, and wanted to thank Gretchen Roberts for all her support of our board and helping take notes. And also wanted to thank some of our committee, Deb Tifft, Jim's wife, and Deb Hull, who have been working with the libraries and launching a Libraries Love Lakes. We'll have more information coming out and getting on our website. We do have, if you go to skaneateleslake.org/libraries, you can see a starter list, but also if you go to the library, there are some books available that Deb Hull and Deb Tifft helped get into the Skaneateles library and read through the books and made recommendations. So we wanted to engage youth and adults through literacy at the libraries. Jim, that's about all I have for a community engagement, other than we did host a landscape design workshop series with working with Cornell Cooperative, Janice Wiles with Go Natives and Doce Loom Farm, and also ESF Restoration Science Center on turf to meadow projects. And so there's more in our newsletter about that and in our past communications, but wanted to cover our community engagement and outreach efforts through the year. So thanks, Jim, for being at the helm of that. And without further ado, I'm going to start getting our panelists in. We still have quite a few folks on board. And I know we're over, but let's get rolling.
Sure.
And
Thank you,
please
Frank.
feel free to keep asking questions.
Okay. Thank you, Frank. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. I'd like to really thank the 4 speakers. And in addition to the 4 speakers, there'll be some panelists who'll be happy to answer questions. I know we do have limited time now. The panelists include Fran Fish, Neil Murphy, Bill Dean, Dana Hall, Buzz Roberts, and Joe Grasso. If everybody's still on, I appreciate that. So do we have some questions?
Go to the Q&A.
Q&A.
Yeah, Jim. So I think we had a question about the curricula, about concerns and control projects in the school districts. That was the
Yep.
floating classroom. And then there was a question for Fran, who I just about a
Yeah.
clear cut, and a question about the solar project that maybe
Right.
Paul could answer too, that we're just finding out more details about and getting into.
Okay.
If you want to
There
read
is-
some of those questions, please go ahead, Jim. Yeah.
Okay. Is there a monitoring of increased sediment resulting from upstream removal of trees along the creeks that flow into the lake? And Charlie Driscoll, perhaps you could answer that question?
Yeah, that's a very timely question. I think it was Paul showed some slides of sediment cores. We've been out the last couple of years, and we have a project where we're collecting depths of sediments down to a couple feet, and we section them and we date them, and we look at the the characteristics of those materials. So we can determine if there's an increase in erosion, we can determine if there's an increase in phosphorus, and we'll be able to do that, recreate this regime over the last 350 years. So we're in the middle of this project, but we should be able to reconstruct what the impacts have been on past land development from this project. So that's a very relevant question. It's something that's in progress, and hopefully a year from now we'll have the answers to that and other questions about how the lake has changed.
Charlie, along the same line, there's a question, if there are any estimates on phosphorus making its way into the lake via the use of chem lawns, extensive use of fertilizers on lawns of lakeshore residential properties. And are there any restrictions on that at this point?
Well, I
They
think
said that Lake George community have enacted laws about this in order to combat HADs. Have we initiated anything along the same line?
Well, I think there are restrictions on the immediate shoreline. I can't remember the distance. Maybe somebody does. We have tried to put out signs to promote refrain, use of fertilizers into the lake. It's not possible to trace the phosphorus from that source compared to other sources of phosphorus. We have to look at that relative to land use characteristics, and so that's one of the things that we're doing as part of the analysis that I talked about. So within each of those watersheds, we look at the land cover characteristics and determine the types of land cover characteristics that are contributing, disproportionately to the phosphorus loading in the lake. So hopefully we'll have some information on that as well.
Okay. And Charlie, there was a question about Grout Brook and why does it not appear in your charts?
Yeah, so
Jim, before we move on to that, I just did want to note that I know town of Skaneateles does have some pesticide policies to not be able to put it within a certain distance from the lake. And then also in terms of our promotion, we are promoting a lot of these having less turf lawns that would need pesticides, and to have more native plants and to consider turf to meadow, but also just reducing the size of your lawn. There's a great New York Times video we sent out in a previous communication about falling out of love with your lawn, and really consider, if you're not going to have a lot of trees and things, there are some meadow plants that have deep roots. Sam Quinn from ESF Restoration Science Center is a great resource for that. Also helps a lot of pollinators with some of the habitat too. So I just wanted to add a little bit on top of that we are promoting more native plant gardens that would reduce the need to have pesticide turf lawns.
Frank, I don't think any, the town regulations are not related to the use of what ChemLawn does. That's all under the New York State law.
There,
And
yeah.
It's not the town, it's New York State.
Yeah,
And-
there is a policy in the town that within 50 feet of the shoreline, you can't put any pesticides. But where it comes down to is where's the enforcement is very difficult on
Yeah.
these policies. But yeah,
You'll have to show me where that is.
yeah, absolutely.
So should I?
There is a question about what's being done to better control the lake depth. Do you want to answer that, Fran? I know that's a pet peeve of yours.
Well, there are highs and lows where the lake is supposed to be on a monthly basis, every month. The difference between the high and low is minuscule, maybe sometimes an inch, maybe an inch and a half, sometimes less. And whether or not they reach the high is determined by whether or not it rains. And they can control how much is let out to a certain extent. They have to let out 6 million gallons a day downstream to keep the fish growing and propagating. They take about 40 million for the city of Syracuse down their own, line to the city of Syracuse. But there are times when they take more and there's times when they take less. There are times like last year when we had that horrible high lake level, when they went from 6 million gallons a day down the stream to 160 million gallons a day down the stream. So I think there's a lot of leeway there, and I'm not really sure how the city makes its decisions.
Okay. There is a question about the long-term ramifications of ingesting Earth Tech's product through drinking water. Do you want to handle that, Neil, or are you on?
Neil, I'm not sure if Neil's calling in from a phone number, but I couldn't find him in the attendee list. He may have had a conflict.
Okay, would somebody like to answer that question, the long-term Earth Tech product on drinking water? Somebody on the panel?
I could say that we don't know.
Yeah, I think that's the answer.
Yeah, okay.
But we certainly are interested in the topic to keep learning it more as about the topic as information becomes more available. But I see Paul raised his
Charlie,
hand.
correct me if I'm wrong, but the concern, of course, is the copper in the Earth Tech and the permanency of the copper in depositing in the lake sediment. And I think we've already indicated that copper levels in Skaneateles Lake are already at a significant level because of random use and deposition of copper over the course of half a century between the 1920s and the 1970s. So the concern is, what is the long-term effect of copper on the human body as opposed to the short-term effect of microcystin and liver? And so I think that's the question. And Charlie, I don't know if you want to weigh in, or perhaps even you, Jim.
Yeah, so I could say that from our lake surveys, one of the things in addition to phosphorus that we measured were a suite of trace metals, including copper. And we found, surprisingly, that the copper concentrations in many of the sediments are quite high and exceeded guidance values that have been established by the DEC in order to protect aquatic life. So, I mean, copper is added to kill the algae, and so it's toxic to aquatic organisms. And so there's concern about existing applications have already put the lake at a pretty high level. And is it prudent to add more? But anyway, but Jim, you may want to amplify.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any definite liver disease that's been caused by that yet, but our levels may not be high enough. And the concentrations vary. So I guess I'm just not aware of any, and same thing with HABs. Now, animals, I think, are a question. With dogs definitely get poisoned by HABs, by the poison HABs, but I'm not sure yet about any human data. Anybody else have any questions on, any thoughts on that? Now, there's another question. Do you have contact information on the Lawn to Meadow program? Frank, you want to deal with that?
Yeah, we can. So it's, if you use your favorite internet browser and put in SUNY ESF and Sam Quinn, that should help connect you to the ESF Restoration Science Center. If I find Sam's email, which I have somewhere, I will put it in the chat box.
Okay.
And Jim, are you scrolling to the top? I don't know. Did we answer the clear cut question if there was towards the top about that?
Go ahead with that then, Frank.
Sure. There was a question. Did anything fruitful develop after we discovered a few years back that anyone clear cut a lakeside property without restriction until they initiated building site plan? You know, in that time, there's no meaningful prevention of accelerated erosion runoff. I'm not familiar with that specific project being or property being referenced to. I do know that we have seen, you know, sometimes at the top of banks, trees being cut down, and then having the banks below that fail, and because there's been interest in having an uninterrupted view shed. So to think about having a tapered look and having more vegetation at the top of these steep banks that are all very shaly, if that's a technical term. But the other thing that I want to give kudos to Mary Menapace and a lot of folks from the town of Spafford leading the charge in getting a steep slopes policy incorporated into the town of Spafford. So thank you, town of Spafford, for taking some leadership. There are some good in the rules and regs for the city of Syracuse. There are some good policies. There's great policies in the town of Skaneateles throughout different municipalities. Part of this 9-element plan will be looking at policy, have a policy analysis related to these rules and regs and different laws in the towns that help protect the watershed. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. But again, sometimes it comes down to we're doing our best to educate, but sometimes it comes down to a lack of when there's a gross negligent violation, whether the remedy is fitting the crime or the ailment. So that's there's not much of a stick in terms of enforcement that we've anecdotally observed. That maybe could be something, or maybe some more carrots that are an incentive to keep these properties doing a great job for our watershed, like, I don't know, tax vouchers through New York State. I see State Senator Rachel May is on, so just putting out a plug for protecting our trees and things. If folks who are investing into our watershed protection projects as landowners, could they get some tax rebates in the future? Maybe there's some more carrots down the way.
Charlie, there's another question regarding HAB formation. If the sediment disturbance is key to HAB formation, is there any potential for capping or stabilizing sediment to reduce that effect?
Well, that could be done, but the area is fairly deep where the disturbance is prominent, and so it would be fairly expensive. But I think there could be some in-lake approaches that could be implemented or at least tried that might be able to mitigate things in near swimming areas. So I think that thinking about in-lake solutions on a local scale to try to minimize contact would be could be a good solution moving forward and should be evaluated. There was also a question that never got answered originally by Chris Legg, and then someone else asked about it, and that was, what about Grout Brook? For those of you who are not familiar with Grout Brook, it's a relatively large stream in the southern end of the lake. The DEC has put a flow gauging station on it a couple of years ago, so we have measurements of discharge. We do have, through measurements from the Upstate Freshwater Institute a couple years ago, there are some measurements, and we were just having a conversation a couple weeks ago with Dana Hall about the importance of Grout Brook. And so I think we're looking for a citizen scientist to help us with collections of water quality that we could implement going forward. So it's certainly on our radar screen, and we do have a little bit of data for Grout Brook, and it's an important site.
And just to add to Amanda Barber with the Cortland County Soil Water Conservation District and Kathy McGrath are a great team down there that are helping with some watershed improvement projects through the soil and water for Cortland County. So thanks for all their work too.
Okay, I think there's one more question. I guess this is, I'll open this to the panel, whoever wants to answer. You have done good work at Willowbrook Creek to control sediment and erosion with the retention pond. Is there any state-supported plan for a comprehensive plan to address the total watershed erosion issues around the lake? This may include the surrounding farmland and the total watershed with retention ponds to slow the flow of water and sediment. Who would like to answer that?
Well, I can take a cut at it, and if Dana is on, he could, I'm sure, do a good job. I mean, I think that we're fortunate in many regards about Skaneateles Lake. The water quality is very good, and the sediments have a natural capacity to retain nutrients, to retain phosphorus. That's all good. It's great protection. But I think over the long term, I think we really have to be aggressive about implementing watershed programs to try to minimize the loss of soil and sediments into these systems. I mean, that I would think the agricultural community would be very supportive of that, because, you know, they're applying fertilizers. They want the land remained intact. So I think we have to think about smart approaches. As I said, there's a very large number of relatively small streams, and I think we're just going to have to work on them. And particularly the remote sensing work, we're trying to identify areas that are particularly problematic and target them. But I think going forward over decades, we're going to have to work on this and really harden the watershed to try to minimize nutrient input to try to protect our water quality over the long term.
That's going to be a cost that's much larger than what SLA's kitty is, I think, but it's going to require a lot. Dana, do you have any thoughts on that at all? Is Dana Holland? I'm sorry.
Yes, yeah. I'm on, and there I am. Charlie's comment about armoring or hardening the more and more of the tributaries around the lake is an important one. We need to find ways to prevent or at least reduce the amount of stream bank erosion and collapse, and you can do that with rocks and timbers, for example, or tree roots. We also need to find ways to be able to slow down fast-moving water, such as creating steps in the stream using tree trunks across the stream, or side retention basins to grab some of the high-flowing water. Anything you can do to slow down the velocity of the water will cause the sediments and the nutrients that are accompanying the sediments to settle out. But we have so many streams that at the pace we're able to tackle them, well, we need a greatly expanded program.
Yeah. There's a question about the Lake Association position with respect to the proposed 80-acre solar farm on Westlake Road and its potential impact on the lake. Do we have any position for that? Does anybody have any comment on that?
Nothing official at this point, Jim, and I'll defer to Paul, but I did read through that. The details are it's an 87-acre parcel. The solar farm project is established for 28 acres. The detail I don't know yet is what part of the 87 acres that 28 acres is on. The description of that property has wetlands, some wetwoods, some forests, but also former agricultural land. So there is comments that in the paperwork that I saw today that was passed along, saying that the the project would not be put in wetland areas and would not be put along water courses. We don't know how much current tree roots and forested areas would be removed. But what they did note as an enhancement is that for the areas that are agricultural land and wouldn't have increased fertilizer, that portion of land would transfer, and the whole the area would have meadows. I don't know if ESF Restoration Science Center is involved in this project specifically, but I know they are consulting on solar farms about having low-lying meadow shrubs and plantings that don't grow higher than the solar panels, but have deeper roots. So if it was a project that was not on a steep slope, and it was a project that was not near water courses and did not remove good root structures like trees, and it was just a transition of some agricultural land to these meadows, that could be an improvement potentially. So that's something that could be part of the assessment. We just don't have all the details to make an assessment at this point. Paul, I defer to you since you read some of that literature today. This just came down the pike to me today, and that was shared.
Yeah, no, Frank, I think it was very well said. I think this is all new information. The Lake Association really has no position on this. I mean, we're a sustainable organization, and this is a sustainable way of producing energy. I think the concerns, obviously, and this was first presented, or at least there was a public hearing, as far as we know, last week at the town planning board, and that's how we caught wind of it. The concern, of course, is that this is right smack dab in the watershed and adjacent to a fairly good-sized tributary, Bentley Creek. We don't know any of the details or the specifics in terms of how close to the creek, or whether or not during the construction phase there could be stream bank erosion and those kinds of things. So there's a lot of open-ended questions here, especially because it's smack dab in the middle of a watershed of a municipal drinking water supply. So obviously this needs to be looked into. Doing a little bit of reading about it today, I mean, just in general with constructing industrial solar farms, there's the questions of changing habitat, the questions of, of pollution during the construction phase, disturbances, potential toxins in the materials that are used to construct solar panels. I really know nothing about that, and I don't claim to yet, but this is something that perhaps needs to be looked into. And then with the degradation of the solar panels, what happens in terms of recycling these panels, maintaining the panels, those kinds of issues. So this is a new topic, and there's always something else coming down the pike that we need to pay attention to. I think it could be a precedent-setting application of fallow farmland or a mechanism to create to create profit from farmland, which is certainly reasonable. And then I think we have to think of the alternatives. What happens if you use the land for other purposes, like building subdivisions or continuing to farm and apply fertilizers? So there's just lots of issues to think about. And we just learned about this. There's no position, but it needs to be looked at by many, many different people, not just the Lake Association.
And again, I think related to the meadow, I'm not sure if ESF's involved with this specific project end, but I know Sam Quinn, whose email I did put up, again, our consulting, one of the other benefits they're mentioning for these meadows below these solar panels, which seems like a good mitigation strategy, is to help with they're designing the plants to help with pollinator species. So bees and butterflies and all those good critters we do want to keep around. So there are definitely seems like there's different points to consider on projects like these in terms of the cost benefit analysis.
Frank and Paul, I believe that's our last question.
Great. I think time to adjourn. We've had a solid hour and a half.
Yeah.
Great job, Jim, moderating. Frank, terrific job. Charlie, really appreciate your great summary. We've learned a lot. And I just want to thank everyone for attending, for their interest. I want to especially thank our terrific board of directors, all the experts we have, all the volunteers that help, whether they're on the board or not. We want to get the advisory council more involved, perhaps over the next year or so, now that hopefully the pandemic is starting to wane a little bit, hopefully. So thank you all.
Paul, I'd like to thank you for your leadership. You've just been great.
You're
You're
very
really a major reason we're very successful. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thanks. And just one last interjection or interruption, whatever you want to call it. I did put our contact us link in the chat box. So if anybody does have any questions we didn't answer or thinks of more questions, that's where you can send them, and we're happy to follow up and give more details. Please encourage others to become members and renew your membership if you haven't yet. And we have recorded this, so we will be distributing it. And so, please review it yourselves, but give it legs and spread it around to the community and help us spread our mission. We really appreciate
we had
that.
great attendance tonight, but we need to get more people to learn more about what we can do to protect the lake. So thank you all, and
Thank you.
good night, everyone.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks to all our speakers. Thanks, panelists.
See
Have a good
you
night.
in person next year, hopefully.
Yeah. Bye-bye.